Sea of Stars came out of nowhere and caught the attention of many people, including myself. This turn-based RPG, somewhat similar to Chrono Trigger, is an indie game initially funded through a Kickstarter campaign. After years of development, it's finally been released. For anyone that cares, I don't have that many hours in Chrono Trigger, mostly because I'm waiting for a remaster of it, but I do know the gist of it. So today, I'll be going in-depth into what I thought of this highly acclaimed game, Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars starts off with both Solstice Warriors. You can think of them as like chosen guardians or heroes, leaving their island to cleanse the world of evil under a solar eclipse. Without spoiling anything, you'll be traveling through the seas in several different biomes and areas to explore as you try to cleanse the world from evil. Pretty straightforward, and is what you typically see in other games in this genre. So, what did I think of the story? I thought it was decent. There were parts that I enjoyed, parts that I laughed at, and some parts that I just saw coming. Looking back on it, it wasn't the greatest story written, but it was decent and simple enough for me to follow along and still be engaged with it. I think the main problem with the story is how both main protagonists, Valir and Zale, are almost treated like silent protagonists for a good chunk of the game. For most of the game, it's always the party members or side characters or even the environment at times be the ones telling the story, which isn't really a bad thing. However, at the beginning of the game, it seems like there was an emphasis on trying to build and characterize both Valir and Zale, from both the useless choice in picking the protag and the lengthy backstory of both of these Solstice Warriors, only to bench them until literally the story started approaching endgame. That was my main gripe with the story, but as a whole, I think it builds onto itself and has a couple of really cool surprises, even if it can get predictable at times. The graphics are amazing. I think that is the main aspect of the game that initially grabbed my attention and made me look into it, and I can assure you it gets even better as you play through it. There are so many different areas and biomes that look so good in Sea of Stars. The characters are pretty hard to miss, as they tend to be on the tropey side, and some of them have a funny twist, but like I mentioned earlier, I wish Zale and Valir had more lines in the middle third, because it really felt like they were benched and other side characters were carrying the story a little too much while these two were benched. The combat is almost like a turn-based Chrono Trigger. Battle positions are arranged in Chrono Trigger style, and everyone takes turns in making their move. It's either doing a basic attack, a magic skill attack, or using an item. If you have more than 3 characters, you can swap one of your characters and still have them do an action. Simple enough, right? There are a few more mechanics to dish out more damage. If you press the action button simultaneously as your character attacks the enemy, you'll deal additional damage and possibly attack again. You can also do this when the enemy attacks you. You press the button at the moment the enemy attacks you, and you are able to reduce the damage taken by a small amount. Essentially, you are rewarded for timing any attacks that are happening. At least in my experience, this was very fun in boss fights, since the bosses had some cool flashy attacks, and I felt rewarded for timing these attacks and defenses correctly. However, constantly doing this against normal enemies got repetitive really fast. Normal enemies only had one skill attack and one basic attack, so after fighting like the same skeleton twice, you understand like what the timings are, and then you have to fight a whole army of them doing the same parry each time. You have to sit through watching each attack animation over and over again, doing the same parries over and over again. Was not enjoyable. I'll say it again though, this was really fun in boss fights, probably because you only fight them once, so it didn't really feel repetitive, but was very monotonous against normie enemies. There is also a way to increase your damage and possibly add an element to your weapon through boosting. Similar to what you see in Octopath Traveler, every time you do a basic attack, you drop like these balls up to 3 stacks, and you can use these balls to boost your character's basic attack or skill. I personally didn't really see like a big damage increase even when 3x boosting an attack. I mostly use these to add an element or hit a weakness. Speaking of weaknesses, when enemies use their skill attacks, they need a couple of turns to charge up and launch the attack. As they charge up, these locks appear above their heads, and you have to match the weakness to cancel their attacks. I actually had fun hitting these weaknesses, especially during bosses towards the latter half of the game, since they're almost like a mini puzzle in itself, and solving it gives you another turn of survival, since the bosses tend to dish out a lot of damage if not handled quickly enough. The music is really good. There are so many different areas with some cool soundtracks. The boss fights music are bangers, and some of them are remixed with like a added spooky track to fit the aesthetic of the area. All the small and big things that they did with the music everywhere in the game were really, really good, and I appreciated every aspect of it. There were many things that were well made and worked, but there were a few things that I didn't like that much. Other than the repetitive combat, the leveling up system needed some work. Picking what attribute you wanted to focus on every time you level up isn't bad, but I didn't really feel any difference. Unless it was gaining more mana points, so you could potentially do more skill attacks before needing MP. If they changed it to where you could get skills for leveling up, or things similar to that, it would make leveling up a lot more meaningful, especially since the only way of getting skills was through story progress. Which isn't bad, but if it's the only source of getting new skills, then it feels more like an adventure game rather than an RPG game, if that makes any sense. Another thing I also didn't like was the equipment. The armor and swords that the shopkeeper sold were pretty expensive, and there was no good efficient way to get money. Not only that, the armor and weapons that you do get are purely for stats, meaning that they only increase the attack or defense stat and nothing else. There are no modifiers such as 10% chance of dealing poison elemental damage or increased damage on correctly timed attacks or whatever. It would have been nice to have some sort of special thing to the weapon to make me have more of a need to get it, but if I didn't have enough money for the weapon now, I know I'll just find a better one or have enough money at the next town, since that particular weapon is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. So how did I think of Sea of Stars as an RPG? It's pretty good for what it is. Kind of confusing ending, but it's still an overall good experience. It's lacking a few main RPG elements that you would typically see in other games similar to this, and without those elements, it makes it feel a bit adventure-y type game. However, I love the graphics, the music, and the boss fights. This is where it really shined the most, and I even enjoyed and loved the animated cutscenes that they sprinkled in during the major story beats of the game. I think anyone who showed any interest to the game through its graphics, music, and combat will definitely enjoy the game. I hope the devs do decide to make a sequel to this game, because I think what they have here is potentially the start of something great. Sea of Stars may not win against other major RPGs released this year, such as Jedi Survivor, Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, and Starfield, depending on who you ask, but it still cements itself as a really good game and is worth any RPG enthusiast's time. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I plan on doing more of these reviews for any game I decide to play, and there is a chance that I will be streaming them. See you later.